You already fixed the rogue DHCP server problem with DHCP snooping. But now, a different attacker sits on the same LAN and does not need to hand out addresses at all. They simply tell everyone, through ARP, send the gateway's traffic to my MAC address. A few gratuitous ARP replies later. PC1 thinks the attacker is the router thinks the attacker is PC1, and normal traffic quietly becomes a man-in-the-middle session. That is the problem Dynamic ARP Inspection solves. ARP is useful because it maps an IP address to a MAC address. But ARP is also trusting. A host receives an ARP reply, reads the sender IP and sender MAC fields, and updates its ARP table. The message is carried directly inside an Ethernet frame, not inside an IP header, so the switch has to inspect ARP itself if we want protection. DAI is a Cisco Layer 2 security feature for CCNA Topic 5.7. Port security does not stop ARP poisoning because the attacker can use one source MAC address. DHCP snooping does not stop it directly because DHCP snooping filters DHCP messages, not ARP messages. But DHCP snooping gives DAI the evidence it needs. The binding table that says which MAC address legitimately owns which IP address on which VLAN and interface. Here is the decision the switch makes. When DAI is enabled on a VLAN with IP ARP Inspection VLAN, every port starts as untrusted. ARP arriving on a trusted port is allowed. ARP arriving on an untrusted port is inspected. The switch reads the ARP sender MAC and sender IP fields, looks for that pair in the DHCP snooping binding table or an ARP ACL, and forwards only if the mapping matches. No match means discard. That one rule kills the common poisoning move. If PC2 sends an ARP reply claiming, I am 10.0.0.1, but the binding table says, PC2 owns 10.0.0.7, DAI drops it before PC1 ever updates its ARP table. The attacker's message never becomes a trusted neighbor entry. The part that matters in real designs is port trust. End-host ports should stay untrusted. Ports connected to infrastructure devices, like routers and other switches, are usually trusted with IP ARP inspection trust. This is not always the same trust boundary as DHCP snooping. A port can be untrusted for DHCP snooping, but trusted for DAA, because ARP from a switch SVI or a router interface may use a static IP address that never appears in the DHCP snooping binding table. Picture SW2 using a manually configured management SVI. It ARPs for the default gateway. If SW1 receives that ARP on an untrusted DAI port, SW1 checks its binding table, finds no DHCP learned entry for SW2's static SVI address, and drops a perfectly valid ARP request. The fix is not to turn off DAI. The fix is to trust infrastructure-facing ports, or use ARP ACLs when you need a manual IP to MAC mapping on an untrusted port. DAI also has optional validation checks with IP ARP Inspection Validate. .src-mac compares the Ethernet source MAC to the ARP sender MAC. dst-mac checks ARP replies by comparing the Ethernet destination MAC to the ARP target MAC. IP rejects suspicious ARP IP values. That includes 0.0.0.0. It also includes 255.255.255.255. These checks are optional, but the exam expects you to know what each keyword is testing. Finally, remember the CPU angle. A switch normally forwards frames in hardware, but inspecting ARP pushes work toward the control plane, So DAI rate limits ARP on untrusted ports by default, 15 packets per second. Trusted ports have no default rate limit. You can tune it with IP ARP Inspection limit rate, optionally adding a burst interval. If the limit is exceeded, the port is error disabled. Recovery is the usual manual shutdown and no shutdown, or automatic recovery with errdisable recovery cause ARP-inspection. Quick recap. Dynamic ARP inspection protects against ARP poisoning by checking ARP sender MAC and sender IP fields against the DHCP Snooping binding table. Enable it per VLAN with IP ARP Inspection VLAN. Leave end host ports untrusted. Trust infrastructure-facing ports with IP ARP Inspection Trust. And remember that static IP devices may need trusted ports or ARP ACLs. Optional validation checks are src-mac, dst-mac, and IP. Untrusted ports default to 15 ARP packets per second, and exceeding the rate can error disable the port.